few weeks ago, Donald Trump put out on social media that he'd forbidden the Israelis to attack the southern part of Lebanon. That had no impact.
This is not a ceasefire. This is a return to war.
We were told that he had said that the Israelis were going to turn their troops back from the southern part of Lebanon because he had spoken to Benjamin Netanyahu. There was no sign again that that had any impact.
And we should be very clear here. The ceasefire is over.
It was an embarrassing weekend for the United States of America as Trump on multiple occasions demanded that the Israelis avoid striking Beirut, Lebanon, in order to avoid escalation in the war against Iran, because Iran, of course, said that striking Beirut would be their red line. Israel went ahead and struck Lebanon, not just southern Lebanon, but the capital of Beirut, and Iran made good on its promise. So there was a massive escalation over the weekend, but making matters worse, the entire global community was able to see just how weak the president of the United States is in the face of Israeli aggression. Now, Iran and Israel did trade strikes over the weekend after the Israeli Defense Forces struck the Lebanese capital of Beirut, which again, Iran made clear was their red line. And so let's actually start with those strikes on Beirut, which took place on Saturday. On Saturday and into Sunday afternoon, just this past weekend, at least 20 Lebanese were killed in intensified Israeli strikes. So then on Sunday, Israel began to strike Beirut's southern suburbs, which Trump had repeatedly demanded that Netanyahu avoid doing. Remember, there was that Axios report from Barak Ravid, where Trump said that nobody likes you, Netanyahu, in a phone call with the prime minister and called him effing crazy. Now, Trump later confirmed that he did in fact say that, but does that really matter when at the end of the day, the Israelis are gonna do what the Israelis wanna do, and you, President of the United States, Donald Trump, you are still going to greenlight tens of billions of dollars in military aid and weaponry to a country, to a government that doesn't respect you, doesn't respect the American people, and only uses and abuses us in order to expand its borders and carry out genocide in some cases, as we're talking about Gaza, and all sorts of war crimes and atrocities in other parts of the Middle East, including attempting to expand into Lebanese territory. Now, here's what we know based on Dave DeCamp's reporting over at antiwar.com. 2 apartment buildings were struck in the suburb of Dahiyeh. These strikes were carried out without any advance notice for civilians to evacuate. Let me read that part to you guys again, because the Israelis who purport to have the most moral army keep saying, well, we give civilians ample warning so they can evacuate. That didn't happen in this case. The strikes were carried out without any advance notice for civilians to evacuate. At least 2 people were killed in the attacks and 20 others were wounded. Remember, these are just the strikes in Dahiyeh, the suburb of Beirut. And that's according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. The wounded included at least 4 women and 4 children, because what would the Israelis be if they weren't attempting to slaughter women and children? And even though the Israelis have slaughtered thousands of his own people, President Joseph Aoun of Lebanon had a sit-down interview with Amanpour for CNN, and he basically says, I don't want the IRGC's help. Because remember, the IRGC is saying, we will not agree to a peace deal unless the bombing of Lebanon by the Israelis stops, and stops for good. And Joseph Aoun, in response to that, says this.
IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, that they don't agree with this, they don't approve this agreement, what happened. It's not your country, it's our country. It's our obligation. It's not your job to interfere into our country. I reject this statement totally, because our people being killed, our houses being destroyed. They are using Lebanon as a bargaining chip in their negotiation with the United States. It's unacceptable. And here also, Hezbollah must understand that. Hezbollah must understand that no other way but to sit and talk. No other way to solve this problem and to save what's left except through negotiation and diplomacy.
So considering the fact that the IRGC seems to be far more concerned about the well-being of the Lebanese people and, more importantly, the borders of Lebanon, I would just like to ask the president of Lebanon what he is saying he's going to do in the face of Israeli aggression and their attempts to expand their borders. I'd like to know what his plan is, because the Lebanese military is weak as hell. They can't defend Lebanon. The only defense that we've seen is by the IRGC-backed Hezbollah groups within southern Lebanon fighting back, attempting to get the occupation, the Israeli occupation done, over with, get them out of the country. What is Joseph Aoun doing? What is he doing? I want to know. And for all of the anti-Hezbollah Lebanese people who are totally in favor of carrying out Israel's agenda of completely demilitarizing Lebanon so they have no means of self-defense, of disarming Hezbollah, I'd like to ask them, maybe you're under the impression that you're good and safe because you're not in southern Lebanon. Maybe you're under that impression. But for the people of Beirut, how did that work out for you? Is anyone really under the impression that without a way of defending itself, the Israelis are just gonna respect Lebanese borders and they're not going to act the way they've been acting, not just over the last few years, but historically for several decades? This is not the first time Israel has attempted to occupy Lebanon, as we all know. And in fact, Hezbollah was able to end an 18-year Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon. But I'm supposed to believe that they're just merely terrible terrorists and we should fight tooth and nail to disarm them, so Lebanon has absolutely no means of defending itself or its borders. Okay, Joseph Aoun is an embarrassment, but luckily he's not my president. Unfortunately, my president is far worse.
The other night, I was scrolling through Shop TYT when I saw our awesome No Money for Wars hat and thought, I need that. I click add to cart, ready to dig out my wallet, but it's on the other side of the room. But right there in checkout, glowing like a beacon, is that glorious purple Shop Pay button. One tap and boom, order placed. That's the magic of Shopify, the platform behind millions of businesses and 10% of US e-commerce, including our own Shop TYT. That purple Shop Pay button is the best converting checkout on the planet. It means fewer abandoned carts and more actual sales. And if you run a business, Shopify makes it super simple to build a beautiful site with hundreds of templates and to blast email and social campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling. It's like having a full marketing team behind you. So do what we did, use Shopify. See fewer carts go abandoned and more sales go with Shopify and their Shop Pay button. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/TYT. Go to shopify.com/TYT. That's shopify.com/TYT.
Anyway, with that in mind, let's go back to the fighting between Iran and Israel. So as I mentioned, Israel strikes Beirut. That was the red line for Iran. And so as a result, the IRGC responds, and here's how they do so. The IRGC said that it targeted Israel's Ramat David Air Base with ballistic missiles, and that Israel must stop its attacks on Lebanon. Ooh, Aoun must be very upset about that. Oh, the IRGC is telling the Israelis to stop attacking my country. How dare they? By the way, I should note this is the first time that Iran has retaliated against Israel over its strikes on a third country, in this case, Lebanon. So later in the bonus episode of the show for our members, I'll be speaking to Dr. Trita Parsi about what this means in terms of the new security alignments within the Middle East. However, Tehran had already warned Israel, again, a week ago, that whenever there is an attack on Beirut or the southern suburbs of Beirut, there's going to be retaliation, and in fact, retaliation took place. So Israel's far-right national security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir absolutely freaked out that Iran would make good on their promise and retaliate against Israel. So in response to that, he said, "Tonight, Tehran must burn." To which I say, for all of the pro-Israel Iranian diaspora in the United States who were egging on this war against their homeland, does that sound like the words of a liberator who's looking to liberate the people of Iran? But nonetheless, at one point, Yemen also joined in the fighting. Again, this is all happening over the weekend. So Israel was taking hits from the IRGC, from Hezbollah, and the Houthis. And then Trump demanded that Israel avoid retaliation in response to Iran's retaliation. He wanted things to de-escalate because it does appear as though Trump wants a deal, but he doesn't realize he can't have his cake and eat it too. The Israelis do not want him to make a peace deal, which is why they intentionally struck Beirut, knowing it was Iran's red line. So Trump is basically saying, please de-escalate, de-escalate. And the one thing that was also different this time around is that the United States did not join in the strikes against Iran as Israel was striking Iran. So to me, that tells me that Trump actually does want to de-escalate, but it's impossible to do it with Israel as your ally. That's just the truth of the matter. So there's a lot more to get to. Now, several media outlets, including Israel's Channel 12, are reporting that Trump basically called Netanyahu and told him, do not respond to Iran's strikes. Israel responded to Iran's strikes. So Axios' Barak Ravid said that Trump told him that he did not want the diplomatic process to blow up because of Iran's attack on Israel. The Iranian strikes didn't hurt anybody, he said. Hopefully Israel is not going to retaliate. If Bibi strikes them back, it's just gonna keep going like that. At least 47 years or the last 3,000 years. I don't know if Trump is trying to make like a anti-Israel joke there. I mean, maybe, but it was promised to us 3,000 years ago is a joke that people who are critical of Israel typically make online. But anyway, Trump also made similar statements on Fox News. Take a look.
President Trump is calling on both sides to stop shooting. He would like to see a return to the negotiating table and reach a diplomatic solution to end the regional conflict. When I spoke with the president last night, he told me he was not happy that the Israelis struck the Lebanese capital of Beirut.
Now, shortly after Iran launched their salvo of ballistic missiles at Israel, the President Trump, spoke to the Financial Times and said that Benjamin Netanyahu will have to accept any deal that the United States negotiates with Iran because it is he who calls the shots. He says Netanyahu won't have any choice. I call the shots. I call the shots. He doesn't call the shots. Sure, buddy. Whatever helps you sleep at night, but we all see what's happening. We all see the truth. This is so embarrassing. Additionally, Trump said that the Iranian strikes didn't change his desire to reach a peace deal with Tehran, saying, quote, it's not going to have any impact on the deal. We'll see how it ends up. But the missile strikes on Israel were attacks that did not kick at all. It's one of those things that's been going for 3,000 years or 47 years, depending on how you count. So he debuted the 3,000 years thing earlier and then repeats it in an interview with the Financial Times. But I just want to really emphasize something. The very last part of that statement, where he specifically says, actually not the last part, in the middle of that statement, he said, but the missile strikes on Israel were attacks that did not kick at all. I'm not sure that's true. Now, Israel claimed that they intercepted every single Iranian missile. I know for a fact that's not true. Here's Crystal Ball explaining what I mean.
You hear the sirens, and this is very significant because you see the missile coming in. You see the attempted interception, which fails, and then this is what appears to be a strike to the ground inside of Haifa, which also Sagar belies. Israel is claiming that they were able to intercept all of these. Yes. It does not look that that was the case.
Now, we know that there's a pretty extreme censorship in Israel as it pertains to any damage or suffering that they have had to bear as a result of this disastrous and stupid war. But make no mistake, these interceptors don't work every single time. And aside from that, even when missiles are being intercepted, you have to think about the wreckage of those missiles falling onto, properties, potentially human beings after getting intercepted. Now, in the case of Israel, most people are sent over to their bunkers to await the attacks and then come out when it's safe. So we don't know if there have been any casualties. So far, I haven't seen any reports of casualties. But to say that every missile was intercepted is laughable because that's not the case. And more importantly, guys, Israel's running out of missile interceptors. And the missile interceptors they do have are not able to deal with some of the drones that Hezbollah is using against the IDF. So the way wars are carried out and the type of weaponry that's used is changing, evolving. And while Israel on one hand would like to pretend as though they are like the most powerful because they have a military superpower like the United States backing them, fact of the matter is the US has depleted its own weaponry. We have not kept up clearly with the impact of drone warfare as it's being used by Hezbollah and other groups. So that's making the situation a lot more complicated and a lot more dangerous for Israel as it continues carrying out attacks against its neighbors. So think about that. At one point over the weekend, they have the Houthis, the IRGC, and Hezbollah attacking at the same time. So I'd like to ask the Israelis, do you feel safe? Is this your idea of safety? Because all that Israel has carried out over the last few years has made Israel less safe. But who knows, maybe that was on purpose. Maybe, as Trita Parsi and I were talking about last week, that's going to be used as justification to potentially carry out a nuclear strike against the IRGC. Because remember, Israel does have nuclear weapons and it is an unhinged country that just carried out a genocide. And they have the audacity to fearmonger about the IRGC's non-existent nuclear weapons. But we continue, because what this war has revealed more than anything to so many Americans and players across the globe is that, the US is much weaker in the face of Israel's demands, Israel's wars, Israel's aggression. In fact, Alan Fisher, who's the chief US correspondent for Al Jazeera, explains exactly what I mean in greater detail. Take a look at this.
A few weeks ago, Donald Trump put out on social media that he'd forbidden the Israelis to attack the southern part of Lebanon. That had no impact. And then, of course, we were told that he had said that the Israelis were going to turn their troops back from the southern part of Lebanon because he had spoken to Benjamin Netanyahu. There was no sign again that that had any impact. So when Donald Trump makes these statements, it's clear that the Israelis may be given tacit agreement on the phone, but their operational procedures are much different. And again, the idea that Donald Trump could, in his words, call the shots and accept Benjamin Netanyahu, force Benjamin Netanyahu to accept any deal that is done with Iran, doesn't quite understand the politics in Israel, and particularly the opposition that Netanyahu would face if he was seen to be doing the United States bidding. In fact, one leading opposition leader has said in the last few hours that it would effectively reduce the idea of Israel not being a sovereign state to a mere satellite of the United States.
Did you guys catch that? Did you catch how insane and insulting it is for Israel to bitch and moan about its own sovereignty and how the Israelis demand to carry out warfare however and whenever they'd like without the US weighing in? Okay, then how about you guys stop taking our money? How about you guys stop engaging in weaselly behavior to try to merge the disgusting, bloodthirsty IDF with our own military? It's amazing to me. It's like they're constant. Netanyahu keeps visiting the United States with his freaking handout, okay? Like a freaking freeway off-ramp panhandler. And then they have the audacity to be like, oh, our sovereignty, our sovereignty. A sovereign country can defend itself. So if you can't defend yourselves without US money and US weaponry being handed to you like a gift, then you're not a sovereign country. The second they stop accepting our money, the second they stop demanding aid from the United States, then maybe I'll respect Israel as a sovereign country. For now, though, Israel should be considered our bitch. Instead, the United States is Israel's bitch. How does that make sense? How many Americans are happy with the fact that we are shelling out tens of billions of dollars to be Israel's bitch? So meanwhile, US sovereignty apparently doesn't matter at all. And Israel did retaliate and started striking Iran. But today it appears that things have kind of died down a little bit. And I think Trump's unwillingness to join in on the strikes against Iran does have something to do with it. So I'm fair, okay? I loathe what he has done to this country. I loathe his foreign policy. But in this very narrow area, I will give him credit for not striking Iran alongside the Israelis, because that would have escalated the situation. Now, Netanyahu, by the way, let me just say, Israel dispatched jets overnight that hit Iranian air defense systems, and of course, a chemical plant in the Mashhar region, and that's according to Israeli officials. So they went after a petrochemical plant. Great, that's going to definitely further impact the economy, not just for Iran, but globally. And then Netanyahu justified their attacks by basically saying the only thing he knows how to say, or the only thing he knows how to do, which is lie. So pay close attention to what he says here and how insane, unhinged, and contradictory it is within the same sentence. Take a look.
Overnight, Israel carried out historic first blow to prevent a nuclear attack on Israel. I reiterate my commitment. Iran will not have nuclear weapon.
You struck Iran to prevent a nuclear attack, and then proceeded to say Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Okay. Total clown show. Total clown show. By the way, there are some reports now within Israeli media, of course, about how the Israelis might turn on Benjamin Netanyahu in an effort to rebrand themselves as individuals who are not genocidal monsters. It wasn't Israel's fault. It's just this bloodthirsty, disgusting prime minister that we had. It's not going to work because it's not just Benjamin Netanyahu, okay? The public opinion polls show it. Various high-level officials within the Knesset can't stop themselves from posting disturbing, bloodthirsty comments about various groups of people on social media. The IDF, for whatever reason, seems to have a weird kink with posting their own war crimes on social media, which is how we found out about the desecration of, Christian symbols in Lebanon, including that Jesus statue. Like, your rebranding effort isn't going to work. The only thing that can help Israel's image is if, they stop attempting to expand their borders and slaughtering innocent people to do it. But they can't stop themselves from doing that. So good luck with your rebranding project. But back to this story. Today, Iran's armed forces had announced a suspension of its military operations. So I think that's a mistake, to be honest with you. I don't know why they're doing this. I think it was a mistake that they agreed to the ceasefire in the first place, as we all knew that, Israel was running out of interceptors. Israel wants the war, give them the war. Mark Levin was freaking out on social media just last night about how there are calls to stop the war. How dare they? I agree with you, Mark. I totally agree with you. I think Iran should re-engage. I think they should re-engage. It's what you want, right? Israelis will be so safe. Now, as we all know, Iran does have more cards to play. Iranian state media, citing an advisor to Iran's supreme leader, reported Monday that Tehran would would block the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. Okay, so that's on top of its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz if Israel escalates its attacks. The latest, and this is the news as of right now, right this moment, obviously it's subject to change. It does appear that Israel has stopped its attacks on Iran as well. So what happens if Trump is, what happens if Trump's supposed efforts at reaching a peace deal with Iran don't work out? The FT asked him about that. Trump said he would consider a commando raid on Iran. Okay, buddy. And then he says, number one, it would mean that possibly we would go in and take care of the rest of the place that we didn't take care of militarily. I mean, you don't have a military option, which is why you didn't take care of it militarily, but I digress. He continues to say, or it would just mean that we would keep the blockade on Iran because the blockade has been probably more powerful than any attack that was ever made on that country. The blockade on the Strait of Iran punishes the entire global community. It destroys the global economy. So sure, you could argue it hurts the Iranians. It makes it difficult for them to transit ships through the strait. But it also means that potentially no ships with cargo transit the strait. And that's not good. So here we are. That's the latest with the war against Iran. Engaging in this war in the first place was a disaster, and it seems like there's no end in sight.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.